Hey, what's up, everybody? This is your host, Ken Twomble Hawkins, and welcome to BBNG. Today, we're going to give you the history of Yeshua ben Yosef, or Yahshua ben Yosef, or Yahushua ben Yosef, aka Jesus Christ, Jesus, the Son of God. Before I start the video, I want to clarify two things. One, majority of this video will be based off of my historical view of Yeshua ben Yosef. The second part is about Yahshua's race. Now, the one thing is people keep forgetting is that Yeshua was a Jewish man who was born in Judea. And around the time of Yeshua ben Yosef, Jewish people had a medium to light brown skin tone that was somewhat darker than the Romans and somewhat lighter than the Nubians, with a hair texture between afro curl, fully curl, and wavy hair. Now, for a second, let's go back to the history of the Israelites and see how they got to the Judean mountains. As you can see on this map, humans have migrated out of Africa around 100,000 years ago. But for the Jewish people, they weren't the first or second wave of humans who left Africa. They was actually the third wave of humans who left Africa between 20,000 to 15,000 years ago. The Natufians left the Horn of Africa up the Nile into the Levant, where they encounter with first and second wave humans. And this is pretty much where we get civilization, slavery, racism, agriculture, and basically the first written language in history. Between 12,000 to 10,000 BCE, the Natufians had built civilization spreading all the way from northwest Africa to the Indus Valley River, and at the same time committing genocide to the second and first wave of humans, most specifically male, and enslaving the females and children. And this is pretty much where we get the stories of how everybody was basically looking exactly the same, spoke the same language, and all the other stuff. For example, in the early texts of Genesis, had it were before the Tower of Babel, people were speaking the same language. And before Noah, before the Great Flood, people had the same skin tone. Even with the Greeks, people had the same skin tone before the Great Flood. But the Greeks believed that their skin tone was the original one, while the Ethiopians got darker. Moving forward towards 2,000 to 3,000 years later, when humans started to reconnect with each other and rebuild civilization. During this new age called the Bronze Age, Kemet was the powerhouse empire during the whole period. And it's from Kemet where we get the people of Israel. And there's some debate that Pabibrus or the Hyksos are also the Israelites. Both of these groups, the Hyksos and the Habibrus, who I feel like are the Israelites due to similar situations and stories that are tied with the first 5 books from Genesis to Deuteronomy. I feel like both these people came together and intermixed with the people in the mountains and became the people of Israel, who was first mentioned by the pharaoh Meneptah, the son of Ramses II, where he basically claimed that he killed all the Israelites. But it's a possibility that he just killed the ones that were close in the coastal regions, while the ones in the mountains ended up surviving. And I feel like this is around the time where we get the Book of Judges and the Book of Kings, where Israel at the time, a group of chiefdoms, became a kingdom, with a couple royal families who was fighting over the throne, at the point where the kingdom split into 2. And this is where I believe the House of David came into play. During this time, when Israel transitioned from a chiefdom to a kingdom, the rest of the world was in chaos. But in reality, the only place that got destroyed was Canaan, which in my belief, I feel like the Israelites teamed up with the Sea people who Pharaoh Ramses III from the 20th dynasty had to deal with, and claimed that he defeated them, which in reality he probably did, but the cities in the Delta regions were already damaged. And during the Bronze Age collapse, this was when Israel controlled the trade route between Mesopotamia and Egypt. For 500 years, Israel and Judea were becoming extremely wealthy off this trade route. So wealthy that they were even richer than the Egyptians and Mesopotamians. But the richest people in the known world at this time were actually the Cushites, which is why Egypt was trying to conquer over Cush for a long period of time. And of course, when Egypt finally conquered over Cush between the 17th and 18th dynasty, they were so known for their wealth that the kings of Mesopotamia said to the Egyptians that gold was like dust in their land. When the 17th and 18th dynasty conquered over Nubia, they ended up intermixing with the Nubians. For example, the first pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, well, specifically the last pharaoh of the 17th dynasty, Utmost the first, his wife was actually Nubian. Even at the time when the Bronze Age collapsed between the 20th and the 22nd dynasty, Upper Egypt was run by the high priests of Amun, who are also the viceroys of Cush. And the word viceroy pretty much means king's son, which means that these prince or kings of the Pacific regions were also direct descendants of the original kings of Cush or Karma, which is why I believe that the 25th dynasty was actually a continuing of the Egyptian dynasty. And during the time when they ruled over Upper and Lower Nile, they ended up restoring Egyptian culture to the Nile and also teaming up with Judea, which is why Nubia gets a high praise in the Book of Kings. So high that the famous King Solomon married a Nubian princess. And this is also around the time where Israel lost their kingdom to the Assyrian Empire and exiled the leaders, which is where we get the story of the 10 tribes of Israel being lost. And then when Babylon conquered over the Assyrian Empire, they went straight into Judea and destroyed the temple. This is when the technical term lost tribe of Israel really came into play, because this is when majority of the Jewish people actually started living outside of Judea. Then Cyrus the Great and the Persians took over Median and then took over Babylon, giving the Jewish people back their homeland and also rebuilding the temple, starting the Second Temple period. And this is technically when Judaism became a real thing. And also where the Old Testament ends at. In between the Old Testament and the New Testament, Israel was conquered over by the Persians, the Greeks, and Rome. Between the Greek and Roman period, Judea had an independent kingdom called the Hasmonean Kingdom. And I feel like they play an important role when it comes to Yeshua ben Yosef, good and bad. And pretty much after their dynasty ended with the reign of Herod the Great and the invasion of Rome, Judea was basically a province towards the Roman Empire. And this is where I feel like Yeshua ben Yosef was born, around 8 BC, when Rome decided to push their census toward Judea, when Judea was still a somewhat independent kingdom under the reign of Herod the Great. And also keep in mind, the reason why Herod the Great is called Herod the Great is mostly because of his building projects, not because of him being a great king. Herod was actually seen as a usurper and a horrible king who was already seen as a tyrant before he even became king. The only reason why Herod the Great became king of Judea wasn't because of his birthright or anything else like that. It was simply because he was married to the last princess / heir to the Judean throne, the Hasmonean dynasty, and also because he was good friends with the Roman elites. It was mostly just his friends who helped Herod the Great become king of Judea, specifically Mark Antony and Octavian Augustus. Both of them vouched for Herod during the council when they announced Herod as the king of Judea. After making sure Herod the Great became king of Judea, Mark Antony helped Herod the Great conquer over Judea. Once the last high priest / king of Judea was killed in battle by Mark Antony, Herod the Great officially became king of Judea. Between Herod the Great's first year as king and Yeshua ben Yosef's birth, Herod the Great was slowly losing his mind as king of Judea when he first killed his brother-in-law in a quote-unquote drowning accident, Then he killed his wife, claiming that she committed adultery and treason. Then after that, he killed his mother-in-law, who tried to claim the throne. By the time of Yeshua ben Yosef's birth, the only people who was a part of the Hasmonean dynasty was Marianne's two sons, and later on her grandsons and granddaughter would survive the wrath of Herod the Great. About a year later, after Yeshua ben Yosef's birth, Herod the Great ended up killing his two sons, who were the heirs to the Judean throne. The main reason why he killed his sons was because he thought that his sons were planning against him with the Great Sanhedrin to kill him for the Judean throne. This is because earlier that year, the Great Sanhedrin did something that would make Herod the Great look more like a usurper, which was switching the Jewish identity from patrilineal to matrilineal. And since Herod the Great could only claim to be Jewish by his father's side, Herod the Great could no longer claim to be Jewish since his mother was Arabian. About a year or two later, after Herod the Great killed his two sons, 3 Jewish spiritual leaders, known as the 3 wise men, came to see the Messiah, specifically Yeshua ben Yosef. The reason why Yeshua ben Yosef was so special even during his birth was because he was seen as the bridge between the two dynasties. And the reason why I say that is because Yeshua ben Yosef's father is from the house of David, and his mother is secretly from the Hasmonean dynasty. The reason why I believe Mary is a part of the Hasmonean dynasty is simply because her grandfather, whose name is Maphthis, matches the name of another man whose name was Maphthis and was seen as the last high priest / king of Judea, Maphthis Antigonus, who ruled over Judea for about 3 to 4 years. Before his death, he had one known daughter named Marianne, who disappeared from the record books after the death of her father. And I feel like Marianne was probably Mary's mother, which gives a good reason for Herod the Great to be so worried about this Messiah being born and wanted to kill this Messiah right away. The 3 wise men understood that Herod the Great was a true tyrant and a hated person who only wanted people to see him as the true king of Judea. So after their meeting with Herod the Great, they went straight to Bethlehem, where Yeshua ben Yosef was born. By the time they caught up to Yeshua ben Yosef, he was already 2 to 3 years old, which means that Joseph was planning to live in Bethlehem with his family. Before the 3 wise men came to Yeshua ben Yosef, gave him gifts such as gold and frankincense, then warned Joseph that Herod the Great was coming before departing from the kingdom of Judea. According to the gospel, when Herod found out about this, he got so mad that he decided to kill all the male children in Bethlehem, ages 2 and under. For some people, this is seen as a myth, but for me, this is seen as one of the small parts of a bigger situation, which was the massacre of the Hasmonean dynasty that happened between 6 BCE to 4 BCE. By the time the Hasmonean massacre kicked off, Yeshua ben Yosef was already living in Egypt. The other Hasmonean who managed to survive the Hasmonean massacre were Herod the Great's own grandkids, who at this time were in modern-day Italy and modern-day Turkey. Once Herod the Great died in 4 BCE, Joseph and his family moved back to Judea. By the time they moved back to Judea, Yeshua ben Yosef was already around 4 to 5 years old. And as soon as they got to Jerusalem, they witnessed Herod the Great's 4th oldest son become tetrarchy of Judea. Once he became tetrarchy of Judea, he ended up killing 3,000 people who was protesting against him. And it was probably this massacre that convinced Joseph to move to the Galilee and basically stay there until around 6 CE. Around 6 CE, the Great Sanhedrin exiled Herod the Great's son and quickly became a true Roman province. Later on that year, Yeshua ben Yosef and his family went to Jerusalem for the first time since 4 BCE. At this time, Yeshua ben Yosef was about 12 to 13 years old. While in Jerusalem, Yeshua and his family visited every building in the city, but the only building that Yeshua wanted to see was the temple. When Yeshua and his family got there, he encountered with two rabbis, specifically Hillel and Shammai, the two leaders of the Great Sanhedrin. While both of them were a part of the same group, the Pharisees, Hillel and Shammai had two different ideas of how to approach Judaism. While Hillel was a more lenient approach, Shammai was a more strict approach. So when Yeshua ben Yosef was talking to Hillel and Shammai, Hillel was impressed while Shammai was somewhat impressed, but at the same time felt like this kid didn't understand what he was talking about. So pretty much while Shammai ignored Yeshua ben Yosef, Hillel took him under his wing and basically taught him the golden rule. Between 6 to 10 CE, Yeshua ben Yosef was learning under Hillel the elder, the Nasi of the Great Sanhedrin. After Hillel's death, Yeshua ben Yosef went back to the Galilee. Now, between the time of Yeshua ben Yosef going back to Nazareth and him teaming up with John the Baptist is widely unclear and was never really documented. And the reason for this is because either one, Yeshua ben Yosef started traveling around the known world, or two, Yeshua ben Yosef was sitting in the Galilee studying away from everybody else, all the way to the point where he gets baptized by John the Baptist. And this was when Yeshua ben Yosef truly became the Messiah, almost like a coronation. When Yeshua started his ministry, he quickly gained followers and attention all over the Galilee, all over Judea, modern-day Jordan and Syria. And it was around this time where his cousin, John the Baptist, quickly got arrested and was beheaded by the royal family of the Herodian dynasty. Right after John the Baptist's death, Jesus started to taking his role as the Messiah extremely serious. We're the point that he ended up sending his 12 top students all over the Roman and Persian Empire, and in some extent down to the Aksum and Nubian Empire, to spread the message that the Messiah is here and the house of David has returned to reclaim the throne of Judea from the Roman elites and the Herodian dynasty. About a year or two later, the Herodian dynasty, the high priests and the Pharisees, not the Hellites, but the Shammaites, started planning ways to get rid of Yeshua ben Yosef by trying to expose him in the eyes of the Jewish people, and also trying to show that the Romans that he is a complete threat to the Judean people and to the Roman Empire. And around 35 to 37 AD, this finally worked, where the point that Jesus got arrested and was sentenced to death by Pontius Pilate, the governor of Judea at the time. And this is where I'm going to stop my video of the history of Yeshua ben Yosef. Stay tuned for the early history of Christianity after the death of Yeshua ben Yosef. And I'm going to also post the video of my family tree and show you my ancestry throughout several different companies. So stay tuned for that. And remember, Black and brown people have an equal place in history.